What Made Me Do It by Ronald Angelo. Redhead 2292. Narrated by David Tredinnick. Well, I saw an advertisement in the local newspaper that read, 4 lessons for $10. Immediately I thought, that's exactly what I need. 4 lessons will do nicely, and I can leave it at that. I was a family man who was then on his own, something I had not been for the preceding 20 years. I had nothing of a social life, and I didn't know how to get one. In the first year I was alone, I tried clubs and pubs, but soon found that wasn't for me. A friend told me about social dances for parents who were alone. I knew it wouldn't be easy to go to such an event where I knew no one, but to have any chance of a social life, I had to take the opportunity. I had a couple of false starts. I got to the door and then backed out, only to spend the following days in contempt of my cowardice. Finally, I forced determination on myself. I made myself get dressed and drive to the venue. I made myself get out of the car, and I made myself walk up the stairs to the dance hall. I paid the token entrance fee and walked into a spectacle. The band, high on a stage at the far end of the hall, urged their music to every part of the room. In the dim light, couples glided around the huge dance floor. It was an organic experience for me. Light and sound and movement, dynamic, living. I was spellbound. It was a scene the like of which I had never heard or seen before. In my childhood and early youth, my father severely restricted the music that my brothers and sister were allowed to hear. He was motivated, no doubt, by the news reports of youth rebelliousness in the United States and Britain. I think that he felt it necessary to shield us from the corrupting intoxication of the music of the 50s and 60s. It wasn't until I was in high school that I heard the music of the times. I loved the music. I must have inherited the gene from my mother. And when it came to dancing, whoa, my father was adamant. No dancing. The overt sexuality of some of the performers of the time was too much for him. He wasn't going to let his children behave in that way, or worse, let them be seduced into sin. My wife and I never danced either, which wasn't because of any strong conviction. It was simply because the children came early, so we lived a family lifestyle. There was no opportunity to go out dancing, even if we had thought to do that. So here I was at a dance, and I had no idea of how I should conduct myself. Looking around, I noticed that the bar was in a small room off to the right of the hall entrance. Lined up along the outer wall of the bar room was a dozen or so men. Each of these men was leaning back against the wall, slightly bent at the waist, with one leg bent backwards at the knee so that the foot pressed flat on the wall. They all held a schooner of beer from which they occasionally tipped foamy sips into expressionless faces. So I bought a beer, even though I don't really like the stuff, found a vacant spot on the wall and joined the pathetics. I stayed there for the next hour, just watching and thinking, then quietly slipped out the door. One Sunday morning, a few weeks later, I saw that advertisement while browsing the local newspaper. The following morning, I rang the dance studio and booked in for my first lesson. That would be on the Friday at 6:30 p.m, which arrangement I was later to learn was deliberately planned. All these years later, I still remember that lesson. I was so surprised that I could comfortably achieve what I was asked to do. Forward, forward, side together, slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. Of course, it was the very fundamentals, but I was pleased nonetheless. There was hope for me. Then, just as my lesson was about to finish, my new teacher says, "The social starts in a few minutes. It's part of your $10 deal. Why don't you have a look in on it?" What the heck? What else would I be doing? So I stayed. Once again, I was amazed. All those people dancing what seemed to me to be complicated steps, in time to the music, smiling, laughing, close together, couples moving as one around the room. I had never seen my parents dance, or even touch in public, and here were these men and women, in each other's personal space, freely enjoying themselves. I couldn't see any sin there. In a break between the dancing, one of the students, an attractive young woman, held out a hand to me, her way of asking me to dance. "Who? Me?" The whole room heard me and burst into laughter. She told me her name. "Kathy," she said, leaned forward, took both my hands, and pulled me to my feet. I was awkward, but I managed by using what I had learned only an hour before. When the dance ended, she said, "Come over and meet the gang." "Ron," I returned in response to her inquiring look. I was welcomed into the gang. We went to the studio socials, of course, and I joined them as they went to dances all over Sydney. In those days, I was attending dances at least 3 times a week. They were such fabulous times, and I still find pleasure in dancing even after the decades that have flown by. I may have needed to push myself that first time, but I have never regretted spending that $10. The end.